I am Jeff Ado. This is Lunacy, where we discern the sacred from the insane and admit that whether we like it or not, we are all profoundly affected by the cycles of the moon. Nice. That was good. That was strong. That was a strong howl. You got a good howl, lady.
Why, thank you.
I like it.
Definitely canine in nature.
Lunacy is a luminary podcast. My luminary guest today is my dear friend, LeeAnn Mallorie. She is a women's coach and empowerment leader. She's somebody who has really trained and developed a lot of people to find their passion and their truth and live their purpose. And I'm really excited to have you on the program.
I'm happy to be here. It's taken us a minute.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Excited to be with you.
Yeah. LeeAnn and I have done a lot of different work together, including a lot of ayahuasca drinking.
Indeed.
Over time. So we can drop in on that a little later on. But I'd love to start out just by talking about your approach to women's empowerment and the differences, the distinctions that you make when approaching that.
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's been a journey, I will say. Some people sometimes are curious about how I got started in this work. And The truth is I started essentially coaching and training in the corporate sector. And this was almost 20 years ago now, actually. And I really got to see what's happening under the hood for women who are the only fill in the blank, right? The only woman in the C-suite, the only person on their team who is female or who thinks the way they do or who kind of sees the world the way that they do. And this really led me to be in a pretty deep question of what are the ways that we get trained to behave inside of our jobs, inside of workplaces, inside of society that aren't necessarily who we really are or aren't necessarily fully conducive to us being able to express ourselves and show up as our most powerful, most authentic, most alive selves at work. And over time, this led me to birth the body of work, Guts and Grace. There's probably quite a bit more to the story, but ultimately, both by tracking the wisdom of my own body through a lot of mindfulness and somatics practices that I was in at the time and continue to do, and then also just by tracking what worked with clients that was different than what was being offered traditionally in either leadership training or women's leadership training on the market. So my body work is called Guts and Grace. I wrote a book much further back than 2020, but published the book in 2020 through Conscious Capitalism. And the book is really about ways that we've trained unconsciously to perform or to be not the most authentic or most grounded or most centered version of ourselves at work as women. And what's really different about Guts and Grace is that there's a lot of learning to walk the fine line between not just replicating what we're seeing men do in the workplace, but also not performing what we think the feminine is or should be, because that doesn't really work either. So there's this kind of balance between a few different aspects of ourselves that are required to find where our center is. And that's what my work is all about.
Beautiful. That's amazing. It's really interesting to me. We were talking about this before, the distinction of like, hey, this isn't about training women to be men in the workplace. And this isn't about training them to have those traits. And there's also something that you speak to in your introduction here, really around that, we, all of us have in some way modified ourselves so that we can thrive in the workplace. And it's not really natural in a way. I mean, it's progress. It's good. There are things that we live in this world. It's amazing. I'm not trying to discount what it is that we've created, but also like since the Industrial Revolution and living not off the land, not with the land, a lot of things have changed. And we have to be a certain way in order to show up a certain way, in order to keep the job and look good for the structure that's been set up. Yeah. And, what I'm hearing in a lot of what you do is like, yeah, we got to really find ourselves and then go to work.
Yeah, and easier said than done, right? And I would say in my industry, it's not even always agreed that it's good to find ourselves if we're going to get ahead at work. So there's already kind of a myth busting or challenging of the conversation that tends to be required. It just depends on who I'm talking to. So if I'm talking to folks who came up in a corporate kind of job or government job, if I'm talking to folks who have learned how to get by, even succeed in a more traditional, quote unquote, Western workplace kind of cultural setting, there's a lot of evidence that if I do things a certain way, to your point, right, then I'll get ahead, then I'll get rewarded, then I'll get promoted. And the interesting thing is, for women, often that's true earlier in their career. Mm-hmm. But the things they may be doing, and this is definitely my story, may not be the highest expression or the most even genuine, authentic, or powerful expression. It's just the expression that tends to get rewarded at that level, in that way, at that moment. Mm-hmm. So in the corporate sector, we'll hear about, let's say, like a leadership cliff, or a way that women get to a certain point but then don't get to the next point. There's all kinds of reasons that are not about the woman herself of why that's happening, right? We can talk about discrimination in the workplace. We can talk about workplace culture. We can talk about patriarchy. We can talk about a lot of things. All of that is true. And at the same time, the ways that we've learned to dissociate from, not be ourselves, are also part of the reason why we may not break through at a certain level. Because at a certain level, whether you decide to stay in that kind of a role, or whether you go out in the world and you're just building your own thing, or you're making music, or you're doing whatever that isn't having your corporate day job, or you're doing some of both, because a lot of us will also side hustle or moonlight or do the things that we do, at some point the things that got shut down are actually hard to turn back on, because we've practiced so much not being those parts of ourselves. I will talk about that as internalized oppression or internalized patriarchy. It's like I've learned, my body has learned, my mind has learned, my heart in a way has learned to, maybe it's keep small, or maybe it's push myself out in certain ways to get attention, for example. And all of that is something that's other than or beyond, or kind of like needs to be released or let go, to be able to just be yourself. And what I found is that when you start to get to more senior levels of leadership, or if you do leave and create something else, again, make music, fill in the blank, whatever you're doing, that it's really when we find that most core expression of who we are that actually we're the most powerful. And actually we are able to be magnetic to the people that we want to attract, whether that be getting the next promotion, or whether that be the people we'd like to have follow us, or all of the above. And so there's an unlearning process that's a lot of the later part of the game of coming into one's full expression as a leader, that is not easy to do, actually. So, requires either drinking a lot of ayahuasca, or some particular kinds of tools and techniques like we teach inside of Guts and Grace, that are a little bit of a slower unlearning and rewiring process, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I definitely want to get into that, and I'd love to hear some of your techniques that you use somatically, et cetera. But I'd also like to just touch on this, the inner patriarchy, mm-hmm. and what that's like. Like, give us a kind of a good definition of that and how that functions within one.
It's funny because I don't know that I've ever been asked to define it, but what I'll say is, when it was part of the tagline of the book that I wrote, all of the publishers are like, we can't publish that. Like, what is Dismantle the Patriarchy Within Us on the front cover of my book? But essentially, if you think about...
That's funny. I think that's hot.
I think to me, that's too, like, right? Cool. I was like,
what's this inner patriarchy?
What does that mean?
Let's wreck it.
Like,
let's take it apart.
Patriarchy, but you know. But it is.
Oh, you can't say patriarchy.
Well, or it depends on the audience, right?
Okay.
I tend to like to be provocative, and it makes me want to ask the question, well, what does that mean? What's the patriarchy within? Like, well, we're all living in a certain kind of context where there's ways things are done. If one way to look at that is men get the goods and women don't. But also another way to look at that is you don't feel your feelings, because that's what we do. We don't feel our feelings, right? There's a certain way of like behaving, operating that's allowable. There's a certain way that's not allowable. You work hard, you get things done, you don't feel your feelings. Almost synonymous in some ways with traditional workplace culture, with the way that we maybe operate in certain kind of family contexts. And we've all kind of learned that that's, to the point where I was saying earlier, how we get by. Mm-hmm. Now, you leave that place. Do you stop doing that? No, because it's embodied. So it takes, we say, 300 repetitions for something to be accessible, like a new move, a new habit, right? 3,000 for it to be embodied. How many thousands of times have I, a woman, or you, a man, in certain contexts, because of what society says, practiced staying hard, not feeling our feelings, pushing to get through something versus surrendering or relaxing when you may need to settle down? We practice, we become what we practice. And so if I say internalized patriarchy or internalized oppression, it's like I've become the context in which I've been oppressed. I've become the context in which maybe I don't feel oppressed, but it's just the context that I've been living in has certain rules, regulations, and ways that we want to be. For me, freedom is I've broken all the rules, or I can if I want to, right? I don't have to not feel my feelings. I can not feel my feelings. I could feel my feelings. Then I have range, then more is accessible. So the state of being captivated by, captured by, or embodying a certain experience of what I've been oppressed by can look like that. It can look like I'm unconsciously or consciously operating by the rules or unable to not operate by the rules of the thing that I've been trained by or the kind of society that I've lived in. It can also be the opposite. So this is where it gets interesting. If I'm constantly fighting against the masculine or I'm doing the other thing, I mean, my version was a little bit more like I would just be emotional soup and plastered to the floor, you know, as a, I was not that, right? I was something other than I can't feel my feelings in terms of my particular embodiment. But in a way, it was a rebellion against the thing too. And so was I free? No, I wasn't free. It was like I had to feel my feelings all the time. I had to let everybody know about the feelings I was feeling all the time. And in that way, I was actually in a reaction that wasn't centered either.
Yeah.
So if we're living in these contexts, we're being like it, or we're rebelling against it, or we're doing the opposite of it. We're all still not in our own full expression. So for me, internalized patriarchy is everything that we've done, whether we be hyper feminine, hyper masculine, all the things that contend with a structure that things have been supposed to be a certain limited way and not other ways. Each of us may, like for you, it might be natural to be that way. That might be actually your highest expression, some of it, but some of it may not be. So what's on the menu, what's not on the menu. And I have found that when we start to unlock and release from that, we have more range. We're not just doing what we're told or the opposite of what we're told. Then it gets interesting, right? Then we can be like, well, what kind of leader do I want to be? What are my real values? I can be more in alignment with them because I'm not unconsciously obeying certain rules. So that's the game I like to play.
Cool. That's an awesome game. I want to play that game, LeeAnn.
Let's play
go,
it together.
Man. You know what I mean? Let's play some ball.
Indeed.
You know?
Indeed. Might not be ball.
Okay, right. It could be frisbee.
Might be.
Or,
exactly.
I don't know, cards.
I might have a boomerang.
You know?
I don't know.
Boomerangs are dope.
Totally.
If you could throw a boomerang and get it back to yourself,
I will give you so much props. Truth be told, I don't have that skill. But
okay, well, we can pretend.
Baton
it's
twirling.
A practice, you know, right? Back to the practice thing. 3,000 repetitions of boomerang.
Lots more if it's a boomerang. It probably takes more than
yeah, I feel like that's really hard.
Indeed.
What comes up for me around what you're saying is, first of all, it's fascinating how much our programming is delivered by the society in which we live and how much of that gets unconsciously delivered to us as we're growing up in so subtle ways. And then all of a sudden we are who we are and we have the limitations that we have. But if we grew up in a totally different context or different culture or a more ancient culture, we might have a completely different way of being.
Totally.
And so that brings up a couple of things. One, what comes up for me is what you're talking about is like permission. Okay. I give myself permission to be who I am, to have the emotions that I'm having, to see where these things are coming from, and then to choose how it is that I'm going to respond and what it is that I'm going to do, which is a big thing for me as a human being, but also like as a performer. You know, it's all about, for me, it's all about permission.
Totally.
Like, do I give myself permission to be my fullest expression, to really embody this song, to really embody this character, to just have fun?
So interestingly, Guts and Grace, my body of work, has gone through a few different names and titles, and Permission to Thrive was one of the earlier ones.
Ooh,
and
that's good.
You like it.
I might steal it.
A lot didn't like it, actually, because everyone's like, well, I don't need permission.
But you do.
But you do, right? And so the way that you're talking about it is the way that I work with that word, which is, can I physiologically, mentally, you know, in my expression and my energy, allow myself to be that or not? And it's not like someone needs me to give them a permission slip to be feminine or to be their self at work. But some part of their psyche is like, I don't have that permission. I am not giving myself that permission. So giving yourself permission to be open in that way might be that you're softening your heart. Or it might be that you take a breath rather than hold your breath. Or it could be any number of things that actually unlocks it. But yeah, I mean, what I don't give myself permission to do, like journal on that for a while, and it'll give you a really good map of what paradigm you're living in and what's off the table.
Oh yeah, that's a great exercise. Journal on what you don't give yourself permission to do. Okay, that's tip number 1, folks at home.
And I didn't think I'd give you tips, but here we go.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's juicy. What do I not give myself permission for? And then also, what do I give myself permission for? And the other thing is like, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, just because the veil between us and the ancestors is apparently thin right now. I don't know if that's true,
heard.
But I like that whole light. I'll go down. These are things that like I'm like, okay, cool, I get it.
Lunacy.
This is lunacy, exactly. The moon is in a place right now where the ancestors are more accessible to us than at other times. There's your moon fact for today. All right. It's also in Scorpio, I guess, which has some grieving thing. There's a grieving element. A lot of people have been feeling that. My last podcast was about grieving. So, but I often think, first of all, I do give my ancestors a lot of love because I think that's a good practice. Like I pray to my ancestors and ask them to come through and, wish them well and thank them for my existence in my life and doing all of the things that they did to get me to be here. How do I honor them with my life? That I find a very empowering context. And there's also like a deep wish in me that we could just have some live examples of how people were living hundreds, thousands of years ago, because it was a totally different scene. It was a totally different context. Some may have been patriarchy, some may have been matriarchy, some may have just been a good balance, but there are examples in our lineages of where people were being fully expressed as a man, fully expressed as a woman, and that was okay. And now, again, I'm not blaming the Industrial Revolution. We've evolved, and you and I wouldn't be sitting here in front of microphones and cameras and lights and such if it wasn't for the advent of progress and technology that we are so privileged to experience. So there's no shade on that. Thank you for all of that. And something was lost there. Something big was lost in terms of our connection to life and our connection to other beings. And I mean plants and animals and the gamut of things that exist on this earth. Something was lost in terms of our true purpose and really feeling like we're fulfilling whatever mission it is that we have to be here on this planet right now, and that it's not just about how much money can I make and so that I can, put it in the bank so that I can do the things that I need to do, that there's something much deeper. And I think, what we're experiencing now is not only an awakening of that nature, but also like a profound craving, like, totally. For God's sake, give me some meaning in my life, give me some purpose. Like, how do I feel like this counts?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so many things. There's at least 2 directions I'd love to go from that. So see if I can remember them both. But one is, one of my teachers, actually, Isis Indria, who I know you know and have interviewed, says...
Yeah, she was on the podcast. Check out that podcast.
Totally.
Amazing.
Definitely watch that podcast.
Egypt.
And, one of the things she says is we're all indigenous to somewhere, right? And so if you go far enough back, there's a memory in your DNA of how it used to be, whatever that means, right? And probably if you go far enough back, there's a memory of living with the land in a different way. There's a memory of before, it was only patriarchy, before all these different things that you're talking about. And again, like loving progress and then being like what got lost along the way. So in my body of work, not really in our, like, I spend a year with women. So typically folks come to Guts and Grace. They do a year of coaching, training, retreats with me.
Cool.
And in our alumni work, although it now more and more, it's coming up in the first year of work, but in our alumni work, we talk about what we call breaking chains and owning bonds. So I say breaking chains is the thread that we've just been on. It's like, what are the ways that I've embodied things that actually aren't helpful, both myself, right, and this body and my life and this experience, and also from my mom's line and my dad's line and my ancestors, things that we've lived or I've lived that have gotten passed, they've lived that have gotten passed down to me that are either in my DNA or literally in my body that actually I need to release, let go of. Our ancestors have suffered in all kinds of ways, right? And our ancestors have suffered at the hands of each other and hurt each other and done all the things that our ancestors have done. And all of that creates a certain kind of tension, a trauma in the body, a way of being, ways we don't give or can't give ourselves permission. So this idea of breaking chains, that's not just me healing in this lifetime, but that's, we say, 7 generations back, 7 generations forward, that there's this untangling to do. On the flip side, and in the positive, there's also what I call owning bonds, which is my ancestors may have had certain gifts, certain kinds of access. They may have carried a certain kind of wisdom or done things in a particular kind of way that got lost or left behind or wasn't really allowed, at the next turn of the generation. And I know for a fact that although I don't know my ancestral line super well, I know that it goes back to Celtic lineage, among other things. And I know that they knew something about how to talk to spirit. They knew something about how to tend the land. They knew something about how to collaborate with the unseen forces, for example. And that's in me. I don't know where it comes from. Like, I don't have any way of tracking that to, like, my mom taught me, or I learned in this way, in this life. Now I'm like studying these things again, but it's also a part of me. And the interesting thing is, if I listen deeply enough to my own body, if I do enough of my own healing, even if I don't have an example, to your point, like, how do we get this stuff back? If I do the work, if I sit with plant medicine, if I feel myself, if I am in practice where I'm releasing some of the shackles that I've been carrying and softening into the real me, my body still has that memory. And so what I found, again, is if I'm working with a woman in leadership, or I'm working even with a team, sometimes with a team, like a workplace team, where it's like, I don't know why, but we all seem to have this capacity we can access that we can't quite explain. And then you start to trust that more as you practice with it more. And you soften the mental chatter that, like, should I use this? Is this something I can bring to work? Well, what if we did? What if we couldn't? What if we actually could be informed by our ancestors, or the memory of what they've known that actually lives inside our bodies, in our DNA, that has gotten passed down, even though we think maybe it hasn't. So I think there's a way that just literally through our bodies and through being settled inside of ourselves, we can re-access some of that. And that's, in a way, now more and more what I'm betting on in the work that I teach, because we need that. Like, we're gonna be in trouble if we don't bring some of that wisdom back. So
we are in trouble.
We are already in trouble. We're gonna be in more trouble if we don't remember.
Yeah, if we don't remember.
So there's that, right? There's like coming to it in our own body through our own softening, healing, reclaiming, re-owning these bonds, untying the ways we've been tied. And in doing that together, by the way. So I just took a group of women to Costa Rica. We do this event called Activate. And really right away, it was a really diverse group of women with lines from different parts of the globe, racially different in terms of the kinds of sectors and industries that they work in. And we sat in the room and I'm like, our ancestors have hurt each other. We have something, not me and you, right? But like, if you look at who's in this room and you kind of backtrack to our histories, that now we get to be in this room, sit here together and actually heal because we're learning from each other, or we're forgiving, or we're healing together, or we're talking about how we want to help make something happen in the world, and we're collaborating on something together. That also starts to right maybe some of the ways the ship has gotten a little bit off course, just through our own experience of being together. And we practice this right in our plant medicine community, that we sit with folks from different religions, and it's like, how can we all even be in a room together and pray? But we can, and that changes something. So what we can do through our own bodies, what we can do in community. And then the last thing is also to study the history of some of these societies, which I've been doing some as well. It's like, we can't go back there exactly, but we can go to those places. We can study the history of those places. We can get curious about that. So
yeah, well, this 7 generations back, 7 generations forward, it's a really nice thing to say, but it's also factual. There's DNA that goes back 14 generations that's up in this junk. So we're not just whistling Dixie or like full on woo woo about this, even though I realize some of this, what we're talking about, is waking up capacities and inner knowing and intuitions and relating to forces that we cannot see, that I'm sure some people out there are like, what the are you talking about? Which I get it. I hear you, folks. All right, I'm with
Sounds
you
crazy,
on a big level. But this is what I'll say. For me personally, investigating these kind of capacities, looking at how do I open myself more? How do I give myself more permission? How do I relate to my ancestors more? How do I heal my lineage? Even just asking that question brings up something powerful for me, and it's empowering. And so, is it true? I have no idea. Does it empower me? Absolutely. And that's how I go through life. Does it empower me to believe that love is the source of all there is and that that's a real thing? Yes, it does. Can I prove it? No. But look at a baby. The baby's in love with life. Like, the animals are in love with life. Why aren't we in love with life? Okay. I think that so much in our society is like, well, we rely on science to prove things, but science is fallible, and it didn't prove, things exist. Gravity existed before it was proven, and apparently they don't actually even understand gravity. Certainly there are things that science has proven that we can rely on, but there's so much that science hasn't proven. Just because science hasn't proven it does not mean it's not true. And certainly like the question of why are we here? Why do we exist in the first place? So I think what you're pointing to is like really, really important. Look at giving yourself permission to investigate your own lineage and how you relate to ancestry. And also, I think something else that you're pointing to, which I feel like is probably the direction that we're going to go into, is like, what other capacities do I have that I haven't opened up yet? How do we, we were talking at breakfast about, well, we use 5% of our brains. LeeAnn and I use at least 5.06. All right. Just saying. We've been working on it.
Takes practice.
There are certainly times where the brain is fully lit up. Like, you can see on scans of people during deep meditation or during plant medicine ceremonies or ayahuasca, like that. Particularly with the ayahuasca experience and also deep meditation. Like, I can't tell you fully what I'm thinking, but my brain feels fully alive. And I feel like I'm existing in a different plane or in a different way, in a much less limited capacity, much more open to, the forces that exist, the life that runs through us, the essence of all that is. And that feels really empowering. So yeah, let's dive into some of that stuff,
Yeah, totally. And I guess also just to go somewhere practical to build a little bit of a bridge, because we did get into the deep water. And I said, right, I don't necessarily say that I'm doing ancestral healing work in my 101 level of class when I teach. But what I do is work with the body. And I shared this with you this morning, that much of what I found my way into came from really humble and practical beginnings that were like, I want to feel better. Let me find a way to take a break from, work, and let me go to yoga for a class. Actually, for me, it was yoga for a while, and then it ended up being Nia technique, which is a really beautiful body of dance movement work. There's a lot behind it. I didn't know that at the time, but just to make a decision to come into relationship and harmony with the body led me to a teacher named Richard Strozzi Heckler, who spent 40 years teaching both Aikido as a martial art and also leadership training that has to do with presence and embodiment. And through that doorway, just in simple ways, for example, if I sit up in my spine and I open my chest and take up more space, that's different than perhaps this posture of like this.
Yeah.
Right? And just that is enough to start the conversation. Then I can start to do a bit more exploring. Well, okay, I feel better when I do that. It's not easy, like I have to remind myself to do that, but I can experience that I have more dignity and there's more permission for me to take up space. And then I go, okay, well, how did I learn to not be like that? I have a client, for example, whose second generation ancestors were in Chinese internment camps in South Africa, or camps. Okay, well, I had to be a certain way, not just to be, get by. I'm not getting promoted, but to survive. And so it's not like I have to believe or not believe that I can connect with my ancestors. Like, my current physical body is showing the shape of what they endured. And so through these almost practical, just beginning to connect with the shape of my body or how quickly or slowly I walk through the world, you don't have to believe the rest. You can just start with something really simple as a beginning point. For me, this journey of really simple body-based practices, releasing my belly, how much as a woman was wrapped up in, I have to keep my belly and I have to look a certain way, be sexy, be appealing in a certain way. And I had chronic back pain when I was 20. And a year of doing less than a year, probably half a year of working with just letting out my belly, I haven't had back pain since I was 27. Now, that won't be everybody's story, right? There's different reasons why we have pain. There's different things that get carried. But what was that band around my belly? It was a perfectionism. It was a polishedness. It was a being, exposed to being judged, or a certain kind of what the media expects me as a woman to be, an attractive woman to be. And so some of the ways in can actually be really simple. Now, for me, doing that work 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, I'm like, oh, wow. And I have ancestors. Oh, wow. And when I open in this way and give myself permission, I can see things. I have a certain kind of intuition or a capacity. And it started to be that I then found my way into these other much more woo, much more questionable, much less research backed domains. But it was like in following the thread, I couldn't not find those things because maybe parts of my brain were coming online, or I was accessing things that I hadn't accessed before. So my doorway in actually was quite practical. And I think more and more people are finding that, especially since the pandemic. I want to be well. I think there might be something going on with this body. There's more that's available, and there's more in what people are tracking now and accessing that I think makes it easier. And then like the slope of how woo we can get very slippery from there. So.
Yeah, obviously where the woo-woo goes to die is wherever it becomes better than thou, like once there's any kind of, which by the way, all spiritual traditions and all religions unfortunately suffer from the perversion of thinking at some point that they are better than other religions, and or that if you don't follow what we're doing, you're not going to be saved and you're going to a bad place when you die, which I personally think is just a big bag of bullshit. And, there should not be any exclusivity about God. And so, but having said that, even in those traditions, like if you look at the Christian tradition, well, they were drinking wine, but it was, if you analyze that wine, there's a lot of entheogens in it. It was different wine than we're doing now. You know what I mean?
And more research suggests, eh?
Yeah. What was Jesus doing when he traveled to the East? Well, who knows? But there's a lot of entheogens and plant medicine and cannabis and whatnot out there that probably he was working with while he was there as well. There's a lot of evidence for, going down these sort of woo-woo rabbit holes. I think as long as one doesn't take it too seriously, as long as one keeps practical and one searches their heart, then there's no risk of it becoming, I'm better than you because I drink ayahuasca, which is just so... Yeah, I don't really hear people saying that, but
I'm definitely worse than you because I drink ayahuasca. Just saying. I'm very clear how much worse I am because I'm drinking ayahuasca. Because ayahuasca ain't letting me off the hook for all the ways that I'm worse and maybe didn't acknowledge it, right?
Yeah, I think, and that's something that we should get into. Ayahuasca, it's work. It's not like it's. I mean, some of it's incredibly blissful and beautiful and amazing, but it's also showing you where your blocks are and what's holding you back and things that you need to work on in life. And like all traditions call it the work. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is, the posture thing that you mentioned. I often, like when I used to teach kids musical theater, and our friend Kai talks about this, the cape walk. I would teach them the cape walk, which is like walk around as if you're wearing a cape, like a king. Pulling your shoulders back, holding your head up high, having your antenna straight, and then see how you feel. When you're in a bad mood. Do that. Hold your head up high. Like just shift your space. Shift the way that you are in reality. And then see how that transitions your emotions and your feelings and how you show up in the world. That's a really good tip that's been great for me.
And how far back does this go, right? So we talk about the ancient traditions that get carried forward that we learn from the wisdom of our bodies. In Kemet in ancient Egypt, there's the jed, which essentially equates to the spine, raising the jed. This practice, you can see in the hieroglyphics, this particular tool, but it represented the uprightness of the spine, because it actually opens the capacity above to connect to spirit, below to ground with the earth, to open across this way. Then what do we see? Then we see a cross, the axis mundi.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you go back again, far enough, but what humans were doing through their own body, through their own practice, was tuning in to a certain kind of full self-expression. You can overperform that. That's a different thing, right? But you can also find your way into it. And then again, in the tradition that I'm a part of, that's more about healing and somatics and leadership, why are we not just like that all the time? If that's the design of the body, if we're built that way, well, I've experienced things that have had me not give myself permission to just be natural, to be upright, to be expressed in this way.
And it's not part of our education system. This is another one of those things, like there should be a processing class. There should be a class on love. Every year, there should be a class on posture.
Definitely a class on the technology of the human body.
Yeah, and what it means to sit up straight. This is like 101 things that we need to know that then we end up learning when we're 50 or 40 or 30 or whatever it is.
When things stop working.
A lot later on, this information would have been useful a lot longer ago. Also this technology of straightening the spine, that's very relevant to almost all meditation practices. Totally. Certainly with Zen Buddhism, which I've studied a lot. If one sits with, in a triangle position, either lotus position or some version of that, with the fine spine, with the spine, with the fine, with the fine spine, with the fine spine, with the spine fine, with the final spine, fully straight, you have a much more resonant meditation, and it's easier to see what it is that you're, like if you're doing koan study, for instance, which is like, what is the sound of one hand clapping, those kind of riddles. It's easier to see the answers to those questions when you're really fully attuned and your antenna is fully aligned, which I think is really what we're pointing to. There's spirit that is moving through us, that is moving from us, and then also into us. And when we attune ourselves somatically, then we get to experience that extra sense of what else is happening. And we get to experience more healing in the body, and also healing in our soul, and also capacity and dreams that are really in line with our highest purpose, our highest mission.
Yeah. Well, and this both brings me back to ancient societies, and also to how we don't use all of our brain or all of our capacities. So in my earlier work with plant medicine, a lot of because I already came in with 20 years of studying embodiment somatic. So like what I'm getting taught, what I'm getting schooled in is like, how does this human technology work? Because I'm interested in that, right? And I'm asking those kinds of questions. And it's like, oh, we have the capacity to be a channel for spirit. We have the capacity to see certain things, to run certain kinds of energies, for example, through us, for the sake of what? For the sake of our growth, for the sake of healing, for the sake of being in community in a good way, for the sake of leading better, for the sake of what we care about. But that if you look back if we look back to Kemet, if we look back to ancient Egypt, if we look back to ancient Greece, it's like people were studying these things and for the sake of attunement, between humans and the land, between humans and each other, between humans and four-legged beings, right? That we can be attuned in a way that we can receive information, a way that we can navigate our way through the relationships that we're in, that these days we kind of pretend we're not in a lot of these relationships, but the relationships that we're in, so we can be in relationship with each other, with, in some cases, we might even say the spirit world. It's not a huge part of my explicit work, but it's a big part of my implicit work, is to be training my body and to helping people train their bodies to be able to be the best receivers of information, intuition, guidance that they possibly can, because I work with folks who are making decisions about where their industries are going or where their companies are going. And I wish to be able to support the women that I coach, teach, and lead to be able to lead with as much capacity as they can, with as much ability to receive good guidance, or to be in harmonious relationship and be attuned to that, to what that is. If I have my spidey senses on, I can tell that you're upset with me.
Right.
Not because you said it, but because I can literally feel that you're like vibrating over there. And I'm like, okay, something is off. We might need to have a conversation. If that's all shut down, I might just go on to the next meeting and not have that cleanup conversation, for example. So,
and there might also be some discernment as to whether or not that's like a personal thing or it's a professional thing.
Totally, completely.
That's really fascinating. I'd love to hear some of the somatic tools that you use in your work with people to really unlock things.
Yeah, at the baseline with Guts and Grace, I sometimes will joke, like if you read the book Guts and Grace or you come study with us or you track some of the things that I do, a lot of it is very simple, but it's like the simple but not easy thing, or the simple thing you should do that you don't actually do. So I teach 13 principles that I say will help unravel or unlock the patriarchy that you may have embodied as a woman, although we've had men come through the program, super useful stuff for anybody. But some of them are actually, related to, do I override my pace or do I move at the pace of somebody else? And do I have more leeway, for example, than I think I do to make my own choices about time and how I be in time or how I be in my own body? So what does that look like if I'm working with someone? Had a client early days who was just programmed to walk really fast. She walked really fast from her car to her office every day. We said, well, let's try on walking more slowly from your car to your office every day. What would change? That was a particularly crafted practice. I don't necessarily teach everyone to walk slow, but for her, that was an unlock that changed her relationship with time. She also happened to be the woman she was on 20 committees. She had a lot of things on her calendar. She moved really fast. She overperformed. There was a built-in sense of that. So beginning to dial in something simple somatically, that's a key to unlock a particular kind of way of being. Now, I also teach basic practices like we were doing earlier, right? A basic centering practice where you come into relationship with your spine, you're taking up more space, you're opening your senses front and back so that you're actually a 360-degree kind of presence. And then, certain things like particular conversational tools where you're tracking who's leading and who's following and what's happening between the two people in the dynamics. There's a lot of different things that we do inside of that body of work that are mostly designed to disrupt whatever the old programming is of the way we've succeeded in the past that isn't totally working.
Fascinating. So it's kind of, you do a lot of work to jostle people up, it sounds like, and really
like
break their patterns.
Definitely.
You're a disruptor.
I'm definitely a disruptor. I like that. I actually get off on that. So most of my clients in some ways are industry disruptors, or they're just like people who see things a little different, because there's a lot about the status quo that like doesn't totally work, including in my body and my status quo, how I'm being, including in how we're doing society. I said to you earlier that I have this vision. It's a little off topic, but I feel called to say it now because it's related, is this vision to in some way have, well, the way I've been talking about it, in the back, not in the front end, right? You won't see this on my website, but it's like that we could have oracles in every sector. So meaning...
Oh yeah, let's get into that.
Women who are awake, who can feel, who have their senses all turned on, who are able to intuit things in the government and in the financial sector and running big business and, creating AI and working on technology. And, I'm fortunate to be meeting the women who are wanting to train themselves up in a way. It's like a Jedi, Jedis in every sector, right? Oracles in every sector. That we are switched on in ways that are more a mirror of what was common in, let's say, ancient societies where we hadn't shut down all of these technologies and capacities inside of ourselves, because I think we need that. And so if I say I like disruption, it's like there's a lot about the status quo that is taking us down a path that probably isn't going to be great for humans or the rest of...
it looks very bad.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, so let's disrupt some shit, because if we keep doing the same thing, we kind of can see where we're going now. So I get excited about anyone who's willing to do something different, see something different, try on something different is exciting to me.
One of the things I really love thinking about is timelines. I love thinking about where timelines are going to go. And there's some evidence that there are multiple timelines in the universe, so it's not just my thought process, but it's also like, what does the future hold and how is it that I can positively impact that future? And so thinking about, things like sustainability and treating the earth well and, like that. Those are important things for me. Reforesting, protecting the forests that we have. making sure that people's basic needs are met in a way that's not super extractive, which is the process that's been going on for so long. Also, just, what you're pointing to is like, how do we have oracles, which are traditionally people who are very tuned into spirit and intuition and who can ask, hey, what's the best course of action for this person or this company or me moving forward, that's really going to open up, a really positive, I want to say heaven on earth kind of a situation, although that's super woo-woo.
At least generative, right? Versus destructive.
Right. What's going to open up because I don't know this heaven on earth thing. I don't even know what that looks like.
It would be nice.
I had a sandwich the other night. It was heaven on earth. You know what I mean? Actually, this mushroom ravioli at the con. Wow. Amazing.
Say, right?
So there are moments of that. But really, like, how do I craft and create a world that's going to be super regenerative, as you said, and how do I tune into using my intuition to do practices, say things, make moves that are going to serve me in the highest way, that are going to serve my children or my relatives in the best possible way, that are maybe going to heal some wound I didn't even know I had, that's from the past, that then maybe that has some impact on the reality of that ancestor that experienced that. How do I foster more forgiveness in my heart? How do I love more? That's something we talk on this program a lot. I love talking about the love operating system. No trademark, no copyright, no interest. How do I love more? How do I give and receive more love? How do I step into that space where I'm really feeling more love and I really feel like I'm giving more love to the people around me? That opens the gateway for like, well, why would you go drink ayahuasca for God's sake, or do crazy yoga practice, or do a darkness retreat, or, all the things that people are doing nowadays that are really like serving as pattern interrupters, that are really like breaking us apart. And if the context is to live in a really good way, to create a beautiful way of being for myself and all those around me, go to town, you know?
And to acknowledge the ways I might be not pointing in that direction. I'll say something a little woo, but it feels fun to say.
Where am I doing destructive behavior?
Right. So when I was in my 20s, I lived in the UK. It was part of when I was writing and really bringing the work of Guts and Grace online. And I had a friend. I met her through a dance or a yoga class, and she was a psychic. That was her work. And I'd never met someone who was a psychic before. So I was like, wow, okay, cool. This woman, like, she's making money. People are paying her to, like, tell them their futures. And I'm like, is that even a thing? But when we got to know each other, I said, well, how does this work actually? Like, are you really reading the future? She said, all I can do is I can sense the path that someone's already on and say, if nothing changes, this is where you're going to land. Interestingly, one of our mutual teachers says, like, gypsies who read cards, folks who have this tradition where they can work with tarot or work with some of these more, let's say, woo technologies. But it's like, what are they doing? They're reading you. They're like, I see what you're vibing. Here's where your life is going. I can kind of get like, guess or not, right? It may or may not be spirit. It might just be like a sensing of the timeline that's kind of already in place based on how you're being right now.
Yeah.
So if we play that forward, we go, well, if we have oracles and AI and technology and the financial sector, it's just like I'm working with women, so I'm going to say a woman maybe can turn this capacity on, or they already have this capacity, they're just not saying it, right? It's like, if we keep doing this, I can see where we're going. Then we go, how do I need to reattune? What's the thing to do? How do I need to reattune to be able to have us go in a different way, to have this get more generative versus destructive, for example? So it can be as wild as like, yes, I channel a spirit and I'm speaking until I can be whatever. It can be crazy like that. It can also just be like, I'm tuned in enough that I can sense where this is going, and I can sense that we might need to retune to be generative, to create heaven on earth, to create what we want to create. And I think that's really interesting. And I'm super unattached to how woo or not anyone wants to get in the conversation. But I do think that I do believe that as humans, we have the capacity to track for these things if we choose. For me, I've almost always found that if someone begins to make choices that are attuned to their own bodies and not hurting their own bodies, they're more likely to also track that they're not hurting someone else or something else and or the planet. So inside of Guts and Grace, one of our modules, we simply work with saying yes and no when we really mean it. Another simple but not easy practice.
That's a great one.
Right.
Okay, good.
And
Another
why
tip,
yes and no?
everyone.
Another tip, right? So take a week.
Say yes.
And say yes when you really mean it.
When you really mean it. Only.
Or say no if it's a real no, right? Do I give yes as a real no?
And don't say yes if you mean no, and vice versa.
For example. Or don't say yes if you mean something else.
Just because you don't want to hurt their feelings.
And how does that relate to sustainability in the planet? I mean, that's maybe a bit of a stretch, but if there are ways that I'm willing to degrade or allow something to happen to myself that isn't good for me, the mirror of that is that I might also be okay doing that to someone else, and I may not catch where that's being overridden. So it's like if we can start to tune into where that attunement is for our own bodies, there's something about the beginning to create certain boundaries where we're only willing to choose to act, to behave in ways that are generative, that are in right alignment for us and for others. We start practicing that. We start to automatically almost be drawn to make different kinds of choices. In some of our world, we also will talk about spiritual guidance. So then it's like, I'm practicing that and I'm more available to whatever guidance I may receive, being like, go pick up that trash, right? Or whatever. Or I just have the intuition to pick up the trash. It doesn't matter.
Make that phone call,
Exactly.
for God's sake. Write the letter to your stepmom or whoever it is. Like, go for it. Do the thing. I want to talk more about... Earlier we were talking about the patriarchy and the inner patriarchy and what that looks like and what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. And also the difference between just that. And also, I mean, no doubt we all have the masculine and the feminine within us at all times anyway. So it's like, what game are we playing? One can't exist without the other. There really shouldn't be, we're better than you or we're going to rule, which has been dismantling over time and is much less pronounced than it once was, but still exists in a lot of underhanded ways and overhanded ways. And also in terms of transforming people from how they've been, before to how they are now. If you look at matriarchal societies, a lot of them would have councils where all the women would sit around and they would talk for a long time about what they were going to do. And they wouldn't choose until it was like they decided, and it would take forever. But
we do that. Yeah.
We
still do that.
The choices were good for the tribe at that time or the community at that time. I'm not saying we need to, that's the way forward. I'm just saying that, let's clarify for us and for our listeners, like, how is it that we see that? How do you see what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman?
Well, first of all, the patriarchy has nothing to do with whether we should, focus on men or women. Really, for me, the patriarchy is strictly the overuse of certain ways of being and or prioritizing men, meaning they get all the goods, like I said before, right? So there's something about the prioritization of one thing over another. So it's not about the masculine and feminine in general. It's about the overuse of one side versus the other side. If I talk about the patriarchy, this is how I work with it. Now,
that's a good distinction.
This is not maybe the technical definition, and certainly there's all kinds of historical evidence of things that happened under the name of patriarchy that we may disagree with. But if I'm just talking about like pulling some of these threads apart, it's like there's an overuse of something happening. We've calibrated too far one direction. Whether I'm a man or a woman, that calibration too far in one direction has hurt me in some way, to the point of things we said earlier, working hard, being stoic, some of the things that go with, could say shadow masculine or overuse of masculine in a certain way. What it means to be a man or woman, I don't know if I can say what it means to be a man, so you can answer that part of the question if you wish, but
happy to.
I can say for me, I'm interested in being a woman who has access to both sides of me, to actually be able to run my more feminine traits, to be able to run my more masculine traits. And we could say yin and yang. We could say, in many traditions, there's kind of a lunar, solar. There's these two aspects of ourself that make up a whole. So it's that there's a duality in way of being that actually completes itself. And in my language, in the body of work I teach, I say guts and grace. So we could say like guts is I keep it together, I stay strong, all of these things. And then grace is like, I can surrender, I can let go, I can be soft, I can allow collaboration or receive something, for example. Guts, I can make something happen. I can get it done. So early in the work I teach, it's about both being able to surrender and also go through the wall. And I can turn on my warrior spirit. I can turn on my, I don't have at the moment what the other side is, but my
water spirit.
My water spirit. Okay, well, let's go with that. My water spirit, for example. And yeah, it's like there's also a now it's like trendy to over-index on the feminine side, or like to reclaim my priestess nature, or to whatever the thing is, all of which is great. What is it to sit in my own center and find my own self-expression as a woman at this time? And it's probably a balance of some things, actually, for me, which is different than a backlash, or to where we started, right? A rebellion, or something that's like, if it's not that, then it has to be this. And then there's almost a show involved, or there's almost a push to reclaim, which is part of the trajectory often to get back to center.
Yeah.
But when I'm just sat, if I talk about myself, because I think maybe also everyone's version is different, my most full expression of my feminine lately is a very deep stillness. Like the void kind of stillness. Like I can just be almost not there, right? Almost so surrendered, so not there, so in the dark, so in the womb, so in the cave, that I'm mostly invisible and therefore available to creation, available to something to move through me. For me, that's, let's say, the feminine. Is that what it means to be a woman? There's some more social constructs I might put around it. But what do you have on your side?
Nothing.
No,
I'm not even going to go there. It's just having a penis, really. That's it.
Okay.
That's one component. Having male genitalia does make you a man, technically.
It's a capacity for penetration. This is the masculine,
that's right?
Which makes sense to me, although I know you're joking and I'm playing back with you. But there's
also,
something about
that's right.
That linearity that's different than this roundness.
Yeah, there's a reason that the masculine is penetrative and that the feminine is receiving. In Hermeticism, there's a beautiful teaching around the gender, and that the masculine is like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do, and then the feminine takes that plan and goes with it and helps to create around that. But that's not because one's better than the other. They work in tandem. Without one, the other doesn't exist. For me, what it means to be a man, and this is distinct from the past. Like I have no shame about being a man. I love being a man. I think it's great.
I know.
But where I come from in being a man also is like, fortunately in my history, like I've always had a lot of respect for women. I grew up with a very powerful mother and two very powerful sisters, very intelligent, very like passionate people. And so I always had that. Like I wasn't ever like, well, men are better. That wasn't part of my conversation. So I feel fortunate in that, because some people have that bullshit. It's also about, looking at, having done like lots of men's work. I've done a lot of different men's work programs. And, when you look at really the Jungian archetypes, because Carl's the boss of this whole thing as far as I'm concerned. Then you start to look at, well, where is it that I'm actually being a man versus being a boy? We don't live in a patriarchy. We live in a poorarchy. So we live in a society run by boys that are pretending to be men, that haven't been initiated, that haven't dealt with their boy nature, that haven't looked at where is it that I'm looking for validation from the feminine? Where is it that I'm trying to please my father? Where is it that I'm being selfish for the sake of being selfish? Where am I being a tyrant, and expecting things to befall me? And then as a healthy masculine male, and by the way, I'm not totally there yet. I'm working on it. I got my sights on it. I can see it. All right. More men's work, more ayahuasca. But I can see it. I know now the difference between being an initiated man and not is knowing when I'm being a little boy and being able to see it. And sometimes I'm like, it doesn't mean I can stop being a little boy. I'm still going to be a little boy, but I can be like, okay, you're being a little boy there. And so then what does it mean to be like a man, like a mature man? Well, that's being of service. That's being a protector. That's how do I provide, and how do I provide in a good way? How do I make sure that the line continues? How do I offer forgiveness? How do I be a good dad to myself, to the people around me, to my students, to my children, if I have them, to my niece and nephews? How do I exert that energy of like forgiveness and like, it's okay, try again, let me show you. Like that's what it means to be a man. It's important to talk about that because I think also like what you and I are about and what's happening in the world, fortunately, is like, how do we work together in the best possible way? And then what are our strengths and our traits that are really most pronounced? And how do the two wings fly together,
Totally. And what you said is really beautiful. And, it has me want to come back in kind with what's the version of that, my side, let's say, right? So the piece about boys and men, I go, okay, well, what's the princess versus the queen? Or I have said to you offline more about like, what's the shadow of the feminine? There's different versions of it, but certainly there is a version that's like, things are being done to me. I'm the victim of my life. There's this like incoming that's like everything is happening to me, and to, do the things I need to do to like call that out, or to, chase support with it or resist support with it, or all of the versions of that I think, unfortunately, in the kind of society we've managed to create and co-create, that there's an analog, there's a parallel to that archetype, which is, being kind of an awful, I spent a good number of years being kind of an awful, afflicted, need to be served in a certain way, or need to be taken care of in a certain way, or need to be, need to blame somebody for something that happened to me kind of way, version of the feminine, a version of, being a woman, which really was much more being a girl, right? Much more being a princess. And what I'm so grateful for is some of the context that you and I share in our spiritual practices and our work with ayahuasca and other technologies. It's like, how do I grow the heck up? How do I grow up and actually be the most adult, and, give permission for myself to be the most adult and fully express version of myself, and take responsibility for also what's on my side of the fence. And to your point, to be initiated. Now, I actually believe that there can be a difference. I don't know if this is like universally true, but in many cultures, it's like there's a set of initiation rites for men, and for women, it's like you kind of self-initiate. Like you go through this process through your own body and through
you're biologically initiated.
There's ways that we're initiated that are a little different. But to be able to receive the initiations that do come to allow them to grow me up as a woman, and then become my version of what that actually means. Like that now too.
It's not celebrated either. Christine's reading a book right now, which I'll insert in postscript the name right here, called
Red Moon Passage by Bonnie J. Horrigan.
That's a really great book. It's been hugely transformative for her. And one of the things that they talk about is how menopause is dealt with in society, and traditionally has been dealt with previously, where women were honored and really like accepted the wisdom that's coming through and their increased intuition, and like celebrated for that. And then also, puberty, right? When a woman bled back in the day, there were a lot of cultures where she would be celebrated. They would dance around the village. They would throw her this huge party. Wow, you're capable of giving life now. Yeah. This is a beautiful tradition, instead of something to be sad and embarrassed about, which is how she grew up. Yeah. If she told you her story, and I'm sure you have something similar, it's just like awful. It's such a bad, it's not something that's dealt with in our society in a good way, whereas it totally could be. That could be part of our actual curriculum in school, and ought to be, if you ask this guy. There are natural initiations that for women that don't exist for men, and then there's a rich history of men's initiations, and there's also a rich history of women's initiations. It's particularly even with that biology, like you go to the red tent, during that time of the month in tribal culture. And then the women are together during that time because they're in a certain level of power with their relation to creation, which, explain menstruation to me in any way that is not absolutely incredible. Like that's when you really think about what's going on, you're getting ready to be able to give life, and then you're also releasing life that you could have given, and that's fundamental. That's like there's a miraculous tendency to that. That's like down to creation and destruction in the same moment. There's something so beautiful and amazing about that. Why is there not that kind of reverence for it instead of just like, this is so embarrassing, or, even down to how PMS is dealt with. It's like, well, PMS wasn't a thing back in tribal cultures because they knew how to deal with that. And they were also going into community and they were dealing with the emotions that come out. It wasn't considered a problem. It's only a problem because there's not an acknowledgement of what's going on in your body, because the society just wants to keep on pumping out work hours so that we can keep making widgets.
So many things I could say, and I'll respond in maybe a less conventional way. I mean, I'm a woman who doesn't currently have children. And so for me, the creative life force and what you just described that my body knows how to do has actually gotten translated more into creation, into innovation, into writing, into different things.
Right.
And interestingly, I have this kind of platform, like I said, where I'm like, women disrupting things, women innovating. I've seen that the women that I work with are really good at figuring out how to bring something to life in a community, in an organization, right? So like also the capacity that our bodies have can be used in that way, and we have initiations in that way, but also the ways that we may use our natural learning around life giving that's just part of our cellular structure to be able to offer different things to society as well. So,
yeah, that's beautiful.
all of that.
That's a great different context. That's awesome. And, maybe in alignment with those cycles too, maybe there's something more, I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. I have no idea how this shit works. All right. But it occurs to me that there could be a timing thing with that for women,
For sure.
That's really rich. Okay, cool. So let's briefly just talk about ayahuasca and why people should not do it.
Why people should not do it. If you're not ready to change, don't drink ayahuasca.
Yeah. If you don't want to wake up, don't.
If you're
drink
not
ayahuasca.
interested in seeing your ego,
Yeah.
getting to know yourself better, definitely don't drink ayahuasca.
Yeah, and I don't mean wake up in a good way. I mean wake up and be like, fuck.
Oh, shit.
This is what I created.
I need to clean that
This
up.
is the mess that but then of course you have like agency and freedom. I don't mean waking up like being woke. I don't
Different.
believe in that. I mean waking up to the things that are in our way, the things that are blocking us, our weaknesses, the things that need to change and shift and transform for us to really like embrace our true path.
Yeah. I mean, I spent 10 years, my early career, mostly studying the ego. So my early career, when I started to coach and started to learn these kind of transformational technologies, was basically being in an organization that would unpack and repack and look at all of the structures of what builds our egos as humans and how that influences our leadership. And when I finally, I didn't grow up in a context where I had access to plant medicine or really any drugs at all. Like I was very not doing any of that for most of my adult life until really maybe 10 years ago. But a lot of that work was like looking at those parts of yourself. And what I found is that if you're in a serious practice of plant medicine, it's kind of the same, just on steroids. Like it's the way ayahuasca works is very similar to everything else that I was doing before ayahuasca. It just made it all happen quite a bit faster. It's like, okay, you want to see how judgmental you are? You want to know where that pattern came from and how that actually works? Like, go sit in a ceremony and ask how I can call in love, whatever. And then you sit there for hours and hours and be like, wow, I really judge people a lot. Okay, I really see how that part of me works.
Yeah.
And I really get that if I want to come into communion in a certain kind of way, I'm going to have to face that. And it's like, yeah, okay. But with all seriousness, so much gratitude to these master teachers, these plants who have come to basically say, okay, y'all, maybe you're not getting there fast enough. Would you like us to help you accelerate your growth as humans? You're growing up, to the point of our earlier conversation. Like, do you want to become women and men a little more quickly? We can help you if you're willing to engage with us in that way, in the right kind of set and setting, with the right kind of teacher or guide, in a ceremonial context, not as recreation or as a way to show off or whatever other reasons we may now that it's trendy, be working with these medicines. It's like if you come in, with a real honest desire to tend the earth in a good way, to have better relationships, to, be of service, what you said, they'll help us go faster.
Yeah.
Show you where the work is faster.
Yeah. That, and also it's just such a deep prayer. Mm-hmm. People have weird relationships to the word prayer.
Also true.
And I get it. There's been a lot of weird perversions about prayer, and like if you screw up, go say 10 Hail Marys or 100 Hail Marys or whatever, and like does that really make any sense? No, it doesn't make any sense to me anyway. I don't get that. Sorry, Catholic Church. There's a lot of like just weirdness around prayer, and then people just don't want to do it. Prayer for me personally is so critically important. Just sitting, just praying for guidance, praying for gratitude, praying for love, praying for a way through. How do I show up better as a husband to my wife? How do I push through these issues? Well, if I didn't pray and have the humility to pray, I wouldn't get to where I needed to get to be still married in a good way with my wife. I mean, that's the truth. And also it's so fulfilling. It's so enriching, and it feels great. I mean, there are, especially like in the circle that we sit, at Celestial Heart, I suppose we can say that now, it's legal, where there's like just some really incredibly beautiful, deep, profound moments of prayer. So if you go into doing plant medicines, whether it's ayahuasca or, mushrooms or even marijuana, if you create a ritual space and create a prayer around it, then that sets the stage for you to have like a much more enriched experience and a much more guided experience. And I think that that's something that's so needed in our society and so beneficial for us.
I agree with that. And it's pretty recent that I would say the word prayer in, a retreat that I'm leading for women in leadership. Although I certainly have clients who are of many different faiths and have a really strong prayer practice. They're not maybe bringing it to work or used to be invited in that way. But I think what you just said is really profound. It's like probably because of everything we've spoken about so far, what we've trained and learned is okay and not okay to do, or what you shouldn't do at work, or what's weird or not weird, or welcome or not welcome, or where we have trauma around religion or different things. It's like, okay, let's try to be totally secular and not use the word prayer. For me, prayer is like being in my sincerity and asking for help, asking for guidance, which assumes that there's something bigger than me or someone other than me that might be able to actually help me, or I might not have all the answers, which is so counter to where we started, to workplace culture, to the patriarchy, that there might be someone, something other than me, my own knowing, that's going to get me through this, that's going to get me out of this, right? That's going to help me heal, that's going to help me grow in some way, that might give me guidance about something. And we've really practiced for a very long time, but not like a very long time, but in the history of the planet Earth, not that long, actually, being dissociated from a collaboration with something bigger than me in certain aspects of our day-to-day lives, or our day-to-day work, and so on. And so it's been interesting to track as I work with more indigenous technologies and do that in the best way, in the most non-appropriative way that I can, to come into my own way of being able to express setting a prayer, setting an intention, sincerely asking for help or guidance, praying for ask or help or guidance. It doesn't matter what language that I use, and I'll tailor the language depending upon who the audience is often. But it's still an invitation that something beyond just you could be part of the conversation, and that in that way you could be held, you could receive, you could be able to surrender or let go a little bit, and something could come to you, all of these things, right? And so when we work in a ceremonial context, it is a humbling of ourselves to be open to that. And I think we really need that as humans right now. I think that's part of how we've dug ourselves some ditches that may be hard to get out of, is that we think we've got it all covered, but like, how could we? We're so small, and there's so much going on, and there's so much information that I couldn't possibly process it all. And there's so many different people with so many different needs. How could I possibly have it all, no matter how big the company is that I lead, or no matter how big the country is that I lead? Like, how could I possibly think that I have it all? And so this practice of sincerely, in a humble way, in a grateful way, asking for support, opening to support. And what I found is in the containers that I create, I mentioned I just took a group of women to Costa Rica. So one of the women who's on my team is initiated in a Native American pipe ceremony tradition. So we took the risk to offer this ceremony, and we had a lot of Christian women in the room. What happened? Well, they prayed to Jesus and we prayed to Great Spirit. And actually it was a really beautiful alchemy because everybody found a way to just be in the practice and in a way that was relevant to what they came to work on as leaders, that was reverent to the fact that there might be something bigger that could be supportive, that was, you know, the right level of risk and not hurting anyone in terms of whatever their particular faiths or detailed the beliefs are. We were able to kind of pop out into just a more, I don't know, like a more open, more receiving experience that I think really served everyone. And each person who was a part of that experience got to say, this is what I wish, and this is what I'm grateful for, to your point, right? To pray for gratitude. This is where I might need some help. And if there is some kind of force out there, whatever I call it, that's bigger than human or beyond human, like I'm open to that being part of how I get there.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I personally don't. I just don't know how people don't believe in God. You know, there's this great comedian who's like, so you believe in nothing? Should we just go back to nothing? What's the difference between that and God? You know, I just think that there's got to be some acknowledgement of, for me anyway, for any of this to make sense, that God or the force or the all or Great Spirit exists, you know, and I think Jesus would be down with all of it, you know, so.
And I would say in just playing with that, being with that, it's like, and I totally get it, because how much have we been injured by or hurt by religion at different points in time?
Yes.
How much have we been trained to keep God out of the workplace? Like, we have so much training, so much history, so much trauma around God, spirit, prayer, all the things that I also have a ton of compassion for anyone wherever they're at and what they're choosing to believe or practice.
Yeah. From a perverted perspective, it's been very much used to dominate and control people. And unfortunately, so much of it has been. Yeah. And so that's like, you know, for me, and I'll say this, you know, my relationship with God is my relationship with God. No one needs to have the same relationship with God. And I would encourage everyone to have their own relationship with God.
Or not God.
Or not God, or whatever it is that they believe in. You know, that my prayer is my prayer. I don't do it in a certain way to please a religion or pass the test to get somewhere. It's my prayer to my source, to whatever it is that gave me life, the great mother, the great father, the great spirit, Jesus, all of it.
I love that about you.
Yeah, let's go. All right.
Thank you.
I ask this for, thank you. I ask this of all my guests, LeeAnn, what is sacred and what is insane?
I think it's what we're just saying. Mm-hmm. Sacred is anything that connects me with something that's bigger than me, that helps me as a human get that I'm fairly small and have a place in a much bigger cosmos, much bigger web of things, something like that. And what is insane is thinking that I have all the answers.
Yeah, that's great. Really good answer. Nice. Okay, I want to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge you for being somebody who seeks to empower women and people in the workplace to really discover who they truly are beyond any sort of like victim triangle. You know, you're somebody who's like really about radical responsibility. You are radically responsible for yourself. That is something that I really strive for in my own life and think is amazingly empowering. So I want to acknowledge you for being about that life. I really want to acknowledge you for just dedicating your life and your work to empowering other people and creating a good way for us to move forward.
Thank you.
Yeah. Amazing. If people want to check out your work or do some work with you, where do they go? What do they do?
gutsandgrace.com. We'll have a new website up per the time of this recording very soon. So really excited to invite people to go there. You can also find me on Instagram. Mostly we're posting at LeeAnn Mallorie. Also, we have an @Guts and Grace Women Instagram. And if you're more on the professional side, easily findable on LinkedIn, I like to say, as long as you spell my name correctly. Otherwise, you'll find people that look like me but aren't me.
She's LeeAnn, LeeAnn.
Mallorie, Mallorie.
Yes. Nice. I like it. I like you spell your name different because I'm Jeff with a G,
Exactly.
all day long.
And if you like the name Guts and Grace, you'll probably like what we're up to. I tend to find the people who are like, if you run away, then don't, like, that's it probably. But if that's intriguing to you, there's probably something with us for you.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued. I think it's dope. Guts and Grace, baby. Let's go. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning. Thank you so much for tuning in, listening to this program today. If you want to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/Lunacy podcast. Any support and help is greatly, greatly appreciated. It helps us continue this work. Much love to all of you. We'll see you next time.